Good afternoon, anybody that may be in the channel this afternoon. Welcome to the studio. Thank you for joining. I'm just going to carry on with an ad hoc piece of art that I started a couple or so weeks ago, which is Punchcraft. If there's any questions, feel free to say hello, ask questions about this or any of the other art forms that I've been doing. I don't mind. Do some black. In case you're wondering what you're looking at something called Punchcraft. It's a way of forcing thread through material, and in doing so creating loops which then form the image on the face side, which is what you're looking at the moment. But generally speaking, this is worked from the back. Just need to thread the needle. So use a dirty great big threader to do that. I would not fancy having to do this without being able to thread the needle with this this particular tool. It would certainly be a definite cause of rage quitting. There are times when it's like that, even though the tool is available. The thread sometimes just does not want to go through the loop. Okay, so as I said, we work from the back through to the front. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of a shadow in, which starts at the back here. This needle has a depth gauge on it, which determines how big the loops are. That's the clicking that you just heard me do there. I've got some black thread here just to create a shadow, but I'm thinking at the same time as creating the shadow I will probably also outline the windows. And I'm not starting where I meant to start. Never mind. Hold the thread in place while I pull the needle out, otherwise I pull the thread out as well, which is not what I want to do, and cut it off. slightly larger shadow at this side, so just restarting it. Okay, now we've got an outline of black around the window, so we will do that as well. Two threads with one cut. To do some black in the lights, but I want to put the lights in first before I do the black, otherwise I'll have difficulty seeing where they should go. Gunter 3, good afternoon, thank you very much, that's kind of you to say so. I've got a bit more window just around here, so before I take the black out I'll just put this edge in. There we go. It looks a little bit untidy, but as soon as thread goes in around it, that'll start to look a lot more tidy, as it sort of does around here. Okay. That's done with the black for the moment. There we go. This is a job you really need about 6 hands to do. Generally this goes a lot easier if you can move the needle sideways while you're doing it rather than forward and back. Okay, there's just one line of thread I need it to do there, which is the corner of the cab. Now I can switch to using the other red again. And I just forgot to do a bit in red, but never mind, we'll come back to that later. Pukema, good afternoon. How does this work? It works by the fact that the needle is pushing the thread through the material. What's stopping it from unravelling is purely the material itself. As I pull the needle out, the material sort of springs back a little bit, and its friction, it grabs hold of the thread and stops it pulling out. If I just yank the needle out, yes, I'll pull the thread as well, but that's where I'm taking care to not lift the needle too far, and that way then I don't get the thread pulling out. If I've not threaded the needle properly, I have forgotten to put it through the side of the needle, then it does pull out. So it really is just down to the friction. And all I'm doing here really is just creating loops. And I'll turn it over in a moment because there's a section here I need to some point switch colours to put yellow back into the tool. Because there is a stripe of yellow goes across the front here. And some areas of dark red as well. So what happens is, effectively, the material, as you punch the needle through, the material catches the thread and holds it, and some more's pulled off the top of the reel holder. As you pull back, in fact, let me just make this needle longer so this will be more obvious. So as you push it through, it creates a loop, or hold there, so the material holds the thread in place so that it lies alongside the needle like that, and this needle is through on the through the face side of the material. As I pull it back, you get a loop created like that, and as the needle starts to come out of the material sort of grasps hold of the loop, and then I'm free to push another length through and pull it back like that, and all that's holding it is just the friction of the material. If there wasn't sufficient friction, or the hole effectively was too large, it would just pull out like that. Yeah, that's right. No, it's not. It's definitely not cross stitching. It is very close woven, and this needle is sharp, and it doesn't actually. Well, I won't say it actually doesn't cut the thread, because I don't actually know if that's the case or not. I suspect it perhaps does, but the density or the way it's woven holds it together. There's a little bit, I guess, of it pushing between the threads as well, but I do know that some threads are cut, because I once tried doing this on some material that looked like this but wasn't this, and it just tore great big holes in it. Bubbles the Monkey, welcome, good afternoon, thank you for joining the studio again this afternoon for this ad hoc stream of me doing some more Punchcraft. I just need to switch colours. If I planned this better, I'd have got it right the first time, and I wouldn't need to keep switching colours. Yeah, we'll use the bright yellow. See what happens. Chris, good afternoon. Welcome again to the studio. Anybody that's watching, we've got a couple of people there in chat at the moment who are streamers in their own right as well, and very good ones. We have Bubbles the Monkey, who does some bead art of various kinds of images, and that's worth checking out. I think you just finished your image last night, didn't you, Bubbles the Monkey? So I don't know what you may be deciding to do next. And then we've got See What Happens, who is an amazing modeler. He creates models out of statues, really, I suppose, out of pipe cleaners, which is kind of an amazing thing. Is currently working on a model of Mega Man, having completed a giraffe and a dog. That may not sound much, but the giraffe and the Mega Man are both going to be about. The giraffe is about 5 feet tall, and Mega Man is going to be about the same thing, and they're self-standing. And pipe cleaners, if you're not aware, is a piece of wire. It's a bit like this, and even more flexible than this. Threader is that's sort of got material stuck through it, if you like, so it's sort of looks furry. Extremely flexible material, as I said, and he turns that into a rigid structure that stands by itself. Utterly amazing, very well worth checking out. Yep, encourage anybody who's looking to follow those two guys. Check them out when they go live. Their artwork is amazing. Right. So I need to put ow! One tip when doing this: don't put your fingers anywhere near where you're about to punch the needle through. It hurts a little bit. It's not hypodermic sharp, but it is quite sharp. Now, rather than cut this off, I'm just going to hold it enough to create a loop. It's alright, Bubbles. Plug anybody that does I was about to say decent art, but art full stop, you know. I don't mind. The thimbles, Bubbles, only partially. I mean, effectively what I'm doing with this, especially in the middle of this hoop, is I'm holding the material, so I'm doing that. I'm not actually sort of trying to put it where my fingers are. I guess I could, but to be honest, it's only just occasionally you don't quite get it right and you just, you know, prod yourself. It's not like I'm ramming this through or anything, so it really is just like, yeah, taking a sewing needle and just catching yourself with it very slightly. It's not something to be worried about or need to protect about too easily. Actually, that's probably a good idea, Chris, isn't it? Thomas the Tank Engine, yeah. I just happened to come across this image one day and liked it enough to try and recreate it myself digitally, as digital art, if you like. And then when I came to do some pyrography, I took my image, if you like, and started trying to reproduce it, you know, practice-wise, as you've probably seen before. And then I kind of started, you know, because of me doing all this art, I started having a desire, shall we say, to do some Punchcraft one. Was it last weekend or the weekend before? Can't actually recall. So I just picked up the same image. Didn't actually think about whether there would be something different to do, but yes, Thomas the Tank Engine, it's a good one, and probably most of the Thomas family. But done under the umbrella of fan art, it would have to be that. So 1, 2, 3. I just need a little bit of dark red around the light case that's here, and that should be a silver grey, yeah. So I'm just applying a little bit of shading here really with this dark red. Yeah. I was just thinking then, doing all of the images, you know, the same image basically in what now? 3 different media, I guess. It's not much different to some other artist doing an acrylic painting, then doing a print, and then doing something else. Right, we'll switch back to this. Was probably the most time consuming, probably the most frustrating part about this particular craft is threading the needle. Especially if it's, you know, you just wanted to change a colour as I did there, just to do a line of yellow or a line of red. That's where the sort of time consuming bit comes in. The frustrating bit is getting this thread to go through the loop. There. Then I've got to decide what colour to do the windows. Now that I've got a great choice, I don't have that many colours. Ow! I missed. Fill in the areas. There is sort of, I guess, some decisions to be made in filling in these areas. The closer I do the punches together, the tighter the material is on the other side. If I do them fairly widely spaced, it becomes sort of more loose and fluffy, shall we say. And although these aren't loosely spaced, but you can see how these are sort of fairly fluffy. So the further apart you start to see the individual loops. As you do it tighter and tighter areas, you get a more defined straight edge on things. But and that, you know, that can have an artistic effect in your image. If you need loose areas like that, it can come in very useful. You can actually also sculpt this as well by changing the depth that the needle pushes through. You can actually, you know, by changing the depth, these loops are shallower or deeper, so you can get areas. I've done one here which probably can't be seen, but it's actually raised as though there's a handrail, if you like, there. The roof is slightly sculpted in that it sort of just has a slight curve on it, because this first row is not as great a depth as the rest of the loco's been done in. It's not a fantastic image to do sculpting on though too much. I may do a bit down here where it gets really dark, just to add some interest into what will otherwise be an almost totally black area. Yeah, that's true, Chris. I do have a second one, but you know, as you can see here, I'm working with about 5 or 6 different colours, and it's just part of it, you know, to some extent. If I was continuous, I mean, one of the sorts of choices you do make is just which areas you do. So I tend not to do isolated areas, just like you know, these steps that I have done on the other side, just because there is a risk of catching them when you're doing anything on the other side and pulling them out, whereas you don't have that when you're in a fairly large block. So if I was sort of switching between 2 or 3 colours, like I might do sort of red and the yellow coming down the loco here, then yeah, probably a good idea. Never actually thought about doing that, so thank you. I shall consider it. At the moment they're kind of all small areas anyway, so I'd probably still be switching colours, just using 2 different needles to do it. I had a horrible thought then I was using the wrong colour, but I'm not. A lot easier to do this if the material is held fairly taut, because you're trying to actually push the needle through the material. Okay, so yeah, that's a bit untidy. We shall see how it looks in a moment. I'm going to put the lamp in there, and then fill in the windows. So a couple of bits of red down here whilst I've got it in the needle, and I guess I could do some more of the body as well. You shall see. Well, didn't quite cut that off properly, and I pulled a couple of loops out. That'll do. As you can see, it's not something you can get a great deal of detail in at this scale anyway. If I was doing it about 3 feet tall or something like that, then I could, apart from using a heck of a lot more thread, I could probably get some detail in there. I think I'm going to finish this front end before I do the body, so I'm going to change colours again. I'm going to just use some grey for the windows. It should be a blue-grey colour, but I'm not sure I've got anything that's particularly suitable. But in a cartoony sort of style, this grey will be okay. You will go through that loop thread. Definitely. I know you're going to go through there. There we go. I've got 2 headlights here as well. Again, so I'm just going to do them with the grey. I could mix a little bit of white in with the grey, but to be honest, it may not particularly show up very well, so we'll just do the one colour. If it looks really sort of missing that little tinge of white, which I doubt, I can always just go in and drop a couple of loops in after the fact, because I'm just punching the thread through. It's not as though, you know, I can only go in places I haven't got thread already. It's Right, we'll now see what the windows look like. Welcome everybody to the studio, anybody that's just joined the stream or only been here a little while. If you're wondering what you're looking at, it's a craft form called Punchcraft. I'm using a punch tool to push thread through the cloth, creating a loop on the other side, which then stays in place just purely through friction. And what I'm doing is I've drawn an image onto the back of this material, and I'm really just filling in blocks of colour using the various threads that I've got available to me. If it's Punchcraft generally comes in kits, so it is possible to buy a kit with a pre-printed pattern on it, and it comes with the material and the relevant tools and the threads that are needed. So if it's something you feel like you might want to try, then you can get started fairly simply with everything that you need, and you don't actually have to try and design your own image or anything like that. If it is something you feel like you might want to try, I'd suggest looking up on the internet for this particular one that I'm doing, or manufacturer that I'm using for this particular tool and threads is a company called Webster's Punchcraft. They're a UK based company, and I don't actually know whilst I'm fairly sure they do mail stuff internationally, I'm not sure whether there's international distributors available or not. I do sometimes look at the backs of these images when I've done them, and apart from sort of fairly fluffy bits, sometimes the backs look almost as good, if not better, than the front. But of course that's entirely up to the person who's doing as to whether or not they actually wish to use the back rather than the front as the image. It's not often though that the back actually looks as nice as the front. Looks like after this particular piece is done, I'm going to need to order some more grey thread. One thing you find, or I find with this, is that no matter how hard I try to keep a straight line, I usually end up eventually being in some sort of weird shape. There's some sort of curve or it starts slanting away. Doesn't matter, but it's just one of those things that I think other people have sort of said the same thing. You just for some reason you just like to work in lines, probably because it's easier, but usually they never end up being straight. Okay, we'll turn it over and have a look at what these windows look like. There we go. Well, they don't look too bad, and now you can see what looked sort of to be quite untidy around there has now sort of tidied itself up. I've got the red, dark red I put in here is sticking through a bit more than I intended. Not quite sure if I accidentally set the needle depth too high, but it's, you know, it adds a little bit of 3D interest, shall we say, to the outside. It's quite, in some ways, it's quite tactile to read, to feel these as well, especially if they have been sculptured. But there we go. So now shall I do these other windows down here whilst I've got this grey in. Then I'll switch to black to outline the lights, and then back to red to finish off the body, and then we do the bit at the bottom which I haven't got the foggiest idea how to do. I know technically how to do it, it's just black thread, but there's all sorts of, you know, I don't want ideally just a big block of black, but it might end up turning out that way. As you can see from the reference image, there isn't a lot of contrast down there. You're seeing just sort of shapes, and I'm not even sure. As I say, I can probably use a bit of sculpting to try and get the shapes, but we shall see. And thank you for that, Bubblester Monkey. It's kind of you to say so. And before I go any further, I'm going to chop that thread off because it gets in my way and it gets annoying. Getting a little bit dark around here, so just popped a light on. Hopefully that also helps you guys see it a little better. Got to hold the loop up off the table, otherwise I can't obviously push the needle through, because it'll hit the tabletop. One of these days I shall have to find my... I've got a favourite pair of sewing scissors. Little tiny nail scissor type things, but they've got really fine points which are great for cutting this stuff off rather than those big ones. Just can't find them at the moment. Thank you. Oh dear. I apologise for that. Anybody who was experiencing problems with the sound there, yes, it was caused by me. A little while ago, my wife came into the room just to tell me she was going out, and so I muted the microphone because she doesn't particularly care to be heard on the broadcast. And I've got I use a trackball most of the time because it's more convenient on my desk, and that's the mouse button there. And the only problem with it, whilst it's really nice to use, it means that if I've left the mouse over the mute button as I had done, and anything touches this, it clicks the mute button, and obviously I kept clicking it, so my apologies to you guys for the problems that you've been experiencing with sound. That's purely down to me. I'm going to have to learn not only to put my keyboard elsewhere, but my trackball, and I'm running out of space. I may have to set up some keys, I think, hotkeys or something like that, so that I don't accidentally mute my own broadcast. And I've kind of done it again, only this time I've gone and I don't know, hit some windows, so I now can't see chat. So let's bring that back up. There we go. It ought to have some sort of lock function, I think. See if I can move things around enough. I'm going to move my trackball right out of the way. I put it right at the other end of my desk. There we go. I can't hit it again. Well, I can't, and the cats might, but if I put my mouse on the background, there we go. Ah dear. So thank you very much for Bubbles for letting me know. Right, so the windows look quite nice there. Quite good. I'm going to put black in again, and a little bit of black to do just around the lights, and then I'll do the red and something down at the bottom end here, and then I start this dreaded space underneath. Thank you. Well, given that I understand that quite a few people just join to hear the voice, don't care about what I'm doing, but just join to hear the voice, then it's kind of important, isn't it? I don't know why people think I've got a really soothing voice, but apparently I have. Whenever I listen to my own recordings, it doesn't sound that way to me. as I mentioned at one point early on in this stream, this is just a sort of an ad hoc thing in the afternoon, and I just, whilst I'm doing this Punchcraft, I just thought I'd stream it. And 2, 3. What I intend to do on tonight's stream, which will start in about 4 hours time, is I will probably be doing some carving tonight. I've got a nice block of wood which is currently sat underneath my trackball, but I've been looking at some, trying to find some images to decide it, and somebody suggested dragons last night, and one of my favourite authors is Anne McCaffrey, who did a whole series of books about about people and their relationship with dragons on a world called Pern. And one of the and the book covers are actually illustrated by a guy whose name has just escaped me, so I'm just going to look it up again. Michael Wieland. And I actually very much like his representation of the dragons. And so I just thought I'd see if I can do a fan art carving, if you like, of some of his pieces. So I've got actually 3 here, which I haven't yet decided which one I'd quite like to do. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts about one. This one would entail a heck of a lot of material removal, so I'm not necessarily sure it's particularly a good one for carving purposes. But I'd mainly just be doing the dragons and possibly something about what they're stood on. And I'll probably leave the person out as well. But anybody got any thoughts of which they think might make a nice image to go on relief carving? It won't be a full 3D carving. It will be, like a picture, if you like, a semi 3D picture, in that it's, there'll be a back plate on which this is stuck down on, so to speak. But anybody got anything that looks, they think might look? Thoughts on what might look like a good carving to do? I have no idea how to do these, how to go about doing it, or quite what they'll turn out like, but there again, that's not stopped me before. And either way, it will be challenging. So it's interesting. So, and if anybody's any thoughts, by all means, please let me know. Ollie Aussie, trains. Are you suggesting trains make you sleepy, or trains are a good thing? 60 tons of metal thundering down a track at 100 miles an hour. It's not the sort of thing that makes me sleepy. I don't know. Everybody has their own opinion, of course. I don't know. There's something. I just love the images quite a lot of the time, but there is kind of something about a 60-ton piece of metal thundering down a track, which is I don't know quite what it is, but there is something about it, shall we say. And of course, this is just one piece. I do like to finish pieces I start, so there's always an opportunity, Ollie Aussie, if you are indeed intimating that you don't find them as interesting as other people do, for you to suggest what might be a good image to do for the next time I do any of this. I haven't yet decided whether or not to include doing this craft in evening streams. At the moment, on an evening, I stream carving, I stream pyrography, and I stream scraperboard. And I generally do them sequentially, so I'll do one, finish a piece, then do another. but I've been thinking of a couple of different things, and that is including something like this in there as well. And later this year I'm hoping to move into a new studio, and if that happens then I'll be able to do some other things like glass engraving and rotary carving, and the other one that I'm trying to say is airbrushing. And I'm also kind of been thinking about whether to do these things on a schedule rather than do them on a one piece at a time basis. So yeah, Monday might be doing scraper board, Tuesday might be airbrushing, Wednesday might be carving, and working through pieces like that. But I haven't decided at the moment. I know there'll always be people that have difficulty with watching certain days, and if it's something that they want to watch, then it's quite awkward if I'm always doing the thing that they want to watch on the day when they can't watch it. So I'm not sure whether it's best to just do a piece and keep doing it until it's done. Again, if anybody's got any particular thoughts on that, I'd be interested to hear. Oops. Oh, there you go. I've managed to actually cut the thread through. It was virtually hanging off. But since that's the last of that one, that's not particularly a problem. You guys are all lurking this afternoon, aren't you? Not that I mind, it doesn't... it's not mandatory or anything. You know what, I kind of preferred it before I put the black in. But never mind. Part of this is learning what works and what doesn't work, and it kind of perhaps would have looked a bit odd, because one of the things about this particular locomotive is they do have those headlights on. Different versions look slightly differently, so right, back to the dark red. So most of that front end now is done. In fact, yeah, all of that front end is now done, so just do down the body. I may go back over the lettering to see if I can make it a little bit more visible as to exactly what it is, because I only did one line or one stroke of thread, and it hasn't shown through too well. It's not too bad, it's kind of sort of, I don't know, fade into the distance type of thing, but it might look a bit better with a bit more thread on it. Hang on a minute, I'm using the wrong thread. That's the right one. I bet nobody was going to tell me, were they? I know, you didn't notice. Daft as it sounds, of all the art forms I do, needle threading on this is the one that requires the most patience. I've been asked with carving or with the pyrography, doesn't it take a lot of patience? And no, it doesn't. I never get the feeling of being impatient with any of those, but here with that needle threading, that's the one that gets the adrenaline going and gets me closer to rage quitting. I noticed a little bit of red missing from up here, so I shall just fill this in first. Now there's a whole load of nice detail down the side of the locomotive which I just can't do. I just don't have the pixels, for want of a better description, to do it, so it's a little bit cartoon style, but that's the way it has to be. pt4 guy, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the studio again. Nice to see you again. How's your day been so far? You know, a lot of you guys have repeatedly told me the time zones you're in, but my memory is terrible. Maybe over time I might eventually get to learn. Now there's some sort of lip that down here, so eventually it looks like it goes white just because of the way the light reflects off it, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah, well, it's easy for you, 84 guy. You only have to remember my time zone. I've got to remember yours and Bubbles and Chris's and 3Ds and Lost in House and Baby Tears and quite a few other people, and they're just the ones that come to mind. Now, luckily, at least 3 of those, and your 4th, you as well, are in the UK, I guess. So, how's the weather been? I guess with you saying being out in the garden most of it, it's been as sunny as it has been up here in Yorkshire. So, looks like the sun's gone in now, and we're getting quite a bit of cloud back. Twisted One. Thank you very much for following. That's most kind of you. Welcome and thank you for joining the studio. It's kind of like become a collective name, hasn't it, now these days, that the studio. But thank you. It's really nice to know that you want to keep up with what I'm doing. Plus, you get to have your name at the bottom of the screen for at least till the end of this stream, or until somebody comes and knocks you off, whichever is that comes the soonest. Yeah, it's really hard though, isn't it, 84 guy, trying to do that. Partly because you're kind of concentrating on something else at the same time. You know, like you with your chainmail, which, by the way, guys, anybody that's watching, I mentioned Bubbles and Chris see what happens earlier on. 84 guy here makes chainmail into things like jewellery and bags and all sorts of interesting things. So another streamer that I highly recommend you check out. It's the most interesting craft to watch, and just see how he weaves all of those rings together into some fairly intricate patterns sometimes. I just don't know how he always manages to get them through in just the right direction so that they all lay flat every time, and he doesn't never seems to end up with accidentally one backwards. Yeah, it's been a bit funny as the weather. It's back end of the week. It really went sort of fairly bad up here. It was raining yesterday, on and off, and then today has been quite reasonable for most of the day. Okay. Yeah, Twitch is playing again, is it? I've not dropped any frames at all. 84 guy. I'm ingesting into the Amsterdam server, assuming it actually is in Amsterdam, which is by no means certain, but I've not checked. Yeah. UK viewers do seem to have some problems sometimes with Twitch and buffering. I thought it had settled down a bit about beginning of the week. Well, as you know, it was a real problem. Oh, I assume you know. And of course, if you're currently refreshing your screen, you haven't heard a word I've said anyway. Gnus, good afternoon. Ah dear. Never had anybody say that so far, not on stream. And clearly it's not true. It's a very interesting art form. Is sewing, cross stitch, yeah. Rugs, yeah, definitely. And even sewing, because after all, people forget there are such a thing as tailors. However, Gnus, welcome to the studio. Nice to see you. Hope you're finding it interesting, and we'll come back and join in future streams as well. I do other things though besides things like sewing. In fact, I don't do much sewing on stream at all. I think cross stitch might be a little bit too boring for most people, it being quite a slow art form. This one's not so bad because it does progress quite fast. Although having said which, none of the other things are particularly fast either. That includes carving and pyrography as well as the scraper board. They all take several hours to progress, and whilst this is quite fast, it still takes or has taken so far several hours. I'm going to tease you all. I'm going to not turn it over until I've done some more of the body. However, what you said, Gnus, there suggests that perhaps you undertake sewing or similar crafts. Is that something that you do? And if so, what what is it that you do, and do you stream as well? To misuse a quote from somewhere that I've no idea where it came from, inquiring minds want to know. It is indeed, yes, that's correct. GNU, GNU. I keep wanting to call you GNU rather than GNUs. It is. There are loops formed on the other side, and it's very similar to the way in which rugs are made. Or some rugs are made, shall we say, where loops of fabric are formed on the other side. Often with rug making, though, they cut the loops afterwards, so they're just vertical strands, but both are done. And talking of rug making, there are actually tools similar to this where you just use thicker wool basically, and a slightly different base material for it, but you can actually make rugs in exactly the same way and create images. I've done a couple of them now, both of them of cats. They were done as presents for somebody who had a particular cat, and it was done as a memorial rug. Still going to keep you hanging now until I do some more down here. Ooh, hey, that's good. Yeah, work does take up a lot of time, but for all of us, I guess, me too. But I am quite lucky. I work fairly close to where I live, as in the same place at the moment. So that means I do finish work and then can start doing my own things immediately afterwards. But polymer sculpting, stone carving, especially, and silversmithing, I'd love things that I personally would love to see. So if you do stream and you stream any of those, then I'm going to reach across for my tracker ball, and what I am going to do is find my mouse, which is on my screen somewhere. There we go. And I am going to follow you so that should I be around when you start streaming, I will have a look, because they do interest me. No, I've not bothered trying to fly the quad again today, Adi. I've sort of spent most of the day kind of like setting up for this evening's, catching up on some videos and you know, trying to find some images to do for the carving tonight. And then I just felt like doing some art, so I started doing this, you know, carried on doing this, and I kind of need to charge the battery again and what have you. So what I'll probably do is tomorrow morning I'll put the battery on charge, and then at lunchtime I'll try resetting the quad back to factory default, and we'll see if I can retrim it again, see if it improves. If anybody is wondering quite what that discussion is about, not yesterday, but the past 3 days previous to that, I built a 4-rotor helicopter, commonly called a quadcopter, on stream, and a lot of the guys here watched me do that. And then yesterday I did some test flying of it. Found some problems, trimmed it out, and I you know, displayed a video last night on the stream. didn't particularly find it a fantastically successful test flight. Didn't crash or anything, it just took a lot of work to both fly and to do what we call trim it out. And I was on the stream yesterday, I said I'll need to do it again, but and just see whether it's quite what the difficulty in trimming it was down to. But the other thing about it, AD, was it was quite tiring to do, and I kind of didn't really want to get tired again today. Gnoos, thank you very much for that follow. You don't need to do it just because I followed you. I do follow people because of what they do, and I don't expect them to follow me back. That's, but if you wish to do so, thank you very much for joining the studio. That's it is kind of you to do that. It's always good for the ego to know that people would like to see more about what you do. And now, of course, you've supplanted my last follower on the bottom of the screen. You do get to go in the end credits, though. Everybody that follows during a stream does get to go in the end credits. I'm going to keep you in suspense just a little tiny bit longer. We've got 2 windows at the end there, and I'm going to fill those windows in first before I turn it over. Yeah, we'll do in a moment. Bubbles the monkey. I'm just keeping everybody in suspense just while I finish that bit, and I've just realised that the windows at the other end aren't coloured in, so just another couple of minutes and then I shall turn it over. No, there's no image converter involved in this. There's kind of 2 ways of doing it. The 1, 2, 3. The bottom left is the reference image for this that I'm using, and what I actually did was I've drawn that on. I've drawn a representation of that, shall we say, electronic art wise in Cobble Painter, and what I did was I then effectively printed that out. But I did some manipulation on it, and I came up with a basically a line art version of it. I could have sitting down and drawn the line art, but having already sort of done the painted image, it was easier just to manipulate the painted image. And then what I've done is I've gone over this. Well, although this is done on a laser printer, I've also gone over it in a blue transfer pencil, and then I've used basically iron and heat on the back to transfer the image onto here, which is all the lines you can see. Works quite well with the laser itself because the laser toner comes through, but the transfer pen does as well, and the 2 have worked quite nicely to combine each other in combination with each other to show up most of the image. But where's the window in there? Somewhere in the middle of that. But yeah, you could draw them by hand. I have drawn them by hand before now, and occasionally I've also taken the actual image and just used the actual image when I've excuse me, when I've been copying a photograph of, let's say, one of the cats, for example. I could sit down and draw it out, but I've got a photograph, so all I've done is I've just used the photograph. In one case I just printed it out on some scrap paper and then used the transfer like that. In another case it was bigger when I did the rug, so what I did for the rug was I actually used a projector. Now then, that's lucky, so I'm going to leave it. The lucky bit there was I hadn't threaded this needle properly. I forgot one vital part of threading this needle properly, and that is it has to go through the side. Otherwise, usually what happens is the thread pulls out. But I've been lucky in this particular case, it hasn't. So I'm leaving it. I'm not going to do it again. But there we go. That's way in the distance, so it kind of doesn't look great, but it's sort of just there. But there we go. That's the upper body of the locomotive. Oh, sorry, you should have said Bubbles. I wouldn't have minded. Tillybug, good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining the studio again. And Lost in House. There you go. All the streamers are in today, and of course Lost there is a music streamer. Another good one to follow. Thank you very much, Tilly and Gnus and Lost. The bit I'm not looking forward to is coming up really rapidly, and that's the underneath, which is virtually all black. So I'm going to do what I usually do. I mean, it's kind of daunting, but I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm going to pick a bit, and I'm going to probably do the rail and the wheels, because because they're slightly different colours, and then we'll just see how it goes from there. Just fill it in, and what'll happen is it'll be done, and I won't have realised I've done it. You know, this is upside down to you guys. Maybe I ought to do it that way. Yeah, it sort of is the soft side, Bubbles. It's a bit like carpet. When you run your hands over carpet, it's, you know, it looks soft, but it's actually a bit firmer than that. But it's certainly tactile, shall we say, to feel. It looks better the right way up than it did upside down. I don't have fantastically good range of colours, so like, you know, this front here, which is supposed to be just a shade of the yellow, because it's dirty and in shadow, but you know what, it makes a reasonable representation. And I have made some mistakes on it, but I've never done a locomotive before. Okay, so I mentioned the wheels. The wheels are rusty, so I've got a nice sort of couple of browns to do the wheels with. And I'm kind of debating what to do the rails with. I haven't really got it's sort of a browny black, and I think what I might do is do that for the rails. Even though I'm going to use that somewhere in the under carriage of this train as well, but with a limited range of colours. And then I don't quite know, I'm going to do something around here, and the sky will probably be a pale blue. I'll have to dig some more colours out for that, but maybe put some green in or something. We shall see. So, rusty wheels. I'm wondering if I get a bit artistic. Yeah, let's see if I can get a bit artistic and mix the two. So that's the lighter one, that's the darker one. Yeah, let's do with the lighter one first. Oh, that's kind, Bubbles the monkey. Thank you very much for that. Tell her she's welcome, and thank you. And I'm almost down to that grey. Luckily I do have another one, because I'm sure I'm going to need that again. Yes, I've numbered it. One tip, if anybody does buy these for, decides to have a go at this with Webster's Punchcraft, if you get the threads, first thing I suggest you do is number them according to the number that they say they should be, because otherwise when you come to look afterwards, trying to work out what colours are which is challenging, shall we say. You know, because some of the colours are quite subtly different. I mean, there's that red, and when you're looking at photographs of them, which is what their colour chart is, as it is with most things like beads and stuff, trying to work out what the colour actually is, of course, depends just on how good your monitor is that you're looking at the photograph. And so it certainly helps to start with by numbering if you can. And in fact, I've got somebody's got this wrong, because that says 12 and that says 12. Now I know that Webster's themselves numbered that one for me, and I numbered that one, so I've obviously got it wrong. Either that, or it's two completely different batches of colour and they're supposed to be the same. I haven't noticed that before. Useful. This is just a 2-ply thread, by the way. It's a slightly fluffy thread, so it's not sort of sewing cotton, but it is just a 2-ply thread, so it doesn't have to be from them, obviously. And especially, as I say, there is a version of this tool which is designed because it's slightly smaller, or the needle is slightly smaller. is designed to work with sewing threads, so you can actually use those as well. And if you use do cross stitch, actually, this is two ply cross stitch thread. So take a cross stitch thread and split it into double plies, and you can use that as well in this particular needle. So you've got, potentially you've got the full thread colour range from people like DMC and Anchor for cross stitch threads available to do art with as well. You can ask, Gnoose. I take it there you mean that, yeah. Please, can I tell you what my age is? I am, what would you call it, north or south? I'm over 50. Let's put it that way. So I've been around over half a century. So things like the first moon landing, I remember actually watching it on television. What I don't remember, well, whilst the moon landing was in black and white, I don't actually remember whether the broadcast was black and white or not, or colour. But there you go. That's before personal computers and before many mainframe computers, for that matter. Right, I am going to try and get some of the wheels in brown just around the rims. I could use some sculpting here by altering the depth the needle penetrates. I could, for example, make the insides of the wheels, and I may actually do that just for a variation, look as though they're indented slightly. Kind of helps when you're doing this to rotate the work around rather than trying to rotate the pen around to work in the direction that you're going. Ow. Got my finger in just slightly the wrong position then. course, one of the difficulties with transferring the material by yourself rather than when they print it for you is, as you're doing things, you tend to rub it off slightly. 80-fold guy, thank you, that's correct. It is a punch tool made by Webster's. They make different, they make different types or styles, and so they're different colours depending on what their intended usage is. So there's a red one which is intended for use with very fine cottons, quite shiny sewing type cottons, so it has a smaller needle. There's a yellow one which I haven't worked out quite what that's meant to be used with. It seems to be sort of a semi-all-purpose. There's a green one which is used by a thicker thread, and there's black which is used with wool for carpets. But yeah, it's a punch tool. And by the way, it's time to zoo. That's an interesting name. Welcome to the stream. It's about now in any particular picture that I'm doing like this, where I start looking at the sort of fuzzy lines that have been half rubbed out, wondering just what on earth it was that they were supposed to represent. Totally random fact, these things underneath the engine which carry the wheels are called bogies. And I'm trying to work out where this one is, so I can put the wheels in. I think. Okay, well, I'm gonna guess. So where would I put them if I was drawing this? So about sort of, okay, the front one would, yeah, that's the front one. The middle, so it's there, right. I can just see an outline. Ow! Whilst I said ow, it was kind of like I thought that would hurt, but it didn't. That one might be a little bit off. Time to Zoo, thank you very much for the follow, for joining the studio. That's very kind of you. I hope you're... Oh! And Gluten Free Gamer, thank you very much for hosting. That's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to have to get a graphic on screen for when that happens as well, aren't I? Thank you. I trust that you're perhaps watching and are lurking there in the chat. So welcome, thank you, and thank you, and welcome to everybody that's in Gluten Stream there, and is also watching. Those of you who are in mine that may not know, Gluten Free Gamer does all sorts of things, cool sorts of things like t-shirt printing and 3D printing, and he was doing some 3D doodling this afternoon. He also does, gets out his markers and does all sorts of images and things like that. Definitely an interesting guy to watch. Oh, the second raid ever. Who was the first? Cannon Bear beat you to it, Gluten Free Gamer, but welcome to all the raiders. And 3D, yes, I saw you in Gluten's stream earlier. You've been watching him all afternoon. Welcome everybody. We are watching me do something completely different as an ad hoc stream on a Sunday afternoon. You're watching me do Punchcraft of this railway engine, and here I am trying to decide just how to go about doing it, because it's a big area of black. So what have we got here? Lewis Therin Thelemon. Sounds like that ought to be a theremin, but welcome. Mad Bats, good afternoon. I noticed you in my chat earlier on. Welcome back. And Gluten himself there. Maltstar, good afternoon. And Paper Super Mario. Oh, well, that's kind of you to say so, Gluten. I mean, if they choose to, that's great. If they don't, well, that's okay with me as well. But thank you for the prompt. I'm now going to put some darker brown in, and we'll see how we go with this. So how's your stream gone this afternoon, Gluten Free Gamer? You probably noticed me there earlier, but then I decided to get on with something else and started streaming. They've beaten you all to it, you see, Gluten. Ah, dear. Those of you who may still be watching for that on either on Gluten's raid or through his rebroadcast through his hosting there, this evening I will be starting to do some carving. This is just a Sunday afternoon ad hoc stream doing this, but I should be doing some carving this evening, some relief carving. I've got a couple of images, 2 or 3 images picked out that I'm going to take a look at and decide. In fact, since there's a few of you around, I'll just show you the images again. I didn't show them on stream, but see if anybody has any particular thoughts. I have a favourite, well, one of my favourite authors is Anne McCaffrey, and she did a whole series of books on the dragons of Pern and their riders, science fiction, and one of the and I always forget his name. Madbat, thank you very much for joining the stream. That's most kind of you, and welcome to the studio. Hope I shall continue to see you quite a bit. Hopefully it's interesting. And Paper Super Mario, you too as well. Thank you very much. Again, welcome to my studio. Anne McCaffrey, the books, one of her favourite illustrators for the covers, and actually one of mine as well, is a guy called Michael Whelan. So I thought I'd try a bit of fan art. I don't normally do that, but in carving. So I've picked out actually two of Ruth, who is the white dragon, out of the books. But Ruth is a he and a unique dragon, in that he's the only white one. But the images just struck me as being nice images that might work with carving reasonably well. And then I've got another one, and I can't remember the name of her dragon, but it's a golden dragon. The character is called Lesser. But I was kind of thinking of doing one of these on the block of wood that I've got. It's relief carving, so these aren't 3D models. These are like a plaque with the thing that's been carved sort of sitting on it, for want of a better description. It's kind of like you slice the bottom off an apple and then stick it down on a board. That's the relief carving. I'm not sure this one would be great because there's such a lot of material to remove and not a lot left, but these two, there's quite a fair bit of material to be left. So I don't know if anybody has got any thoughts on what they think might look good as a relief carving. I will probably leave Jackson, who is the character, out if I do either of these or Lesser on this one. So I'm just doing the dragon and possibly a little bit of what he stood on, but I don't know, if anybody's got any thoughts, please feel free to mention it, and if I agree, I may well just pick that particular image to go ahead with. He definitely is, and most of the Mad Bat, you might, if you like him, take a look at him on the internet, take a look at his website. I think it's michaelwhelan.com, which was, but all of these are actually not. These are parts not of the book cover. The book cover is part of it, but he did full canvases. Which one? That was the one on the right, I believe. Free. Oh, the one in flight. That's the one in flight. So you think that one? Yeah. He apparently got the image that Anne McCaffrey wanted for her dragons, in that they are, whilst they look a little fearsome, they were friendly dragons. They didn't have scales and long necks or anything like that. So he apparently picked up on it straight away, and had been one of her favourite illustrators. So a couple of people have said this one with what looks like a mushroom tree, I think. Three, I think you meant this one with the green background. So that's interesting, rather than that one. So we've kind of got two candidates. I was kind of I sort of know where Free's coming from in that one. I kind of like that one, and possibly it would be the easiest one to carve because it's, relatively speaking, a long way in the distance. So there's, the actual dimensions are quite thin in the vertical direction. This one, though, sort of fills the piece a little bit more because it's a fairly large piece of wood. It's a fairly chunky piece of wood, and if you were to take this one, a fully half of the wood, a fair of that whole side, well, if it's that way up, if you see what I mean, a fair chunk would disappear. But that's that was just my first thoughts. Oh dear. 2-1, you're being outvoted, Free. Going to print purple tentacle anytime soon? I'm not following that particular comment, Bubbles the Monkey, I'm afraid. I literally don't know. I literally don't know. As you know, that one potentially would be the easiest one. It's a nice image of a dragon in flight, as opposed to one which is just it's just perching on something. This one does put most of the wing actually on the back of the wood. It will be the lowest part virtually, whereas this requires potentially quite a bit of undercutting in order to make the wings stand up proud of the body. So potentially, I don't know if Free was doing it, suggesting it because of his suspicion it may well be the easiest one to do, but yeah. I don't recall. Would you like to do it again, Bubbles? My memory is terrible. If I said I liked it, I definitely liked it. I just can't recall it now. I probably created a bookmark somewhere as well. For the moment, I shall go back to the train. So I don't know. There's sort of. Oh, okay. Oh, fair enough. That's okay then. Yeah. Nah, all right. I don't actually know what it is. I mean, it's not mushroom. It's more like a cauliflower tree, really, when you sort of look at the detail of it. And it's kind of odd when I'm looking at that and I'm going. That seems to be over the top of the character. So how's his wing in front of the tree? But I'd leave the tree out of it. Actually, I'm afraid. I'd probably, if I did this, just the few pinnacles that he stood on. I'd just do those to actually ground him on something, because he's not in flight, and it's kind of the wrong pose for him to be in flight. So it's kind of 2 to 3, 2-ish votes to 3-ish votes at the moment. I'm not going there. Okay, well, I shall get on with something for a while. It might go all the way to the wire until I actually sort of come to put it on, put the outline on the block of wood. See, I am partly thinking of you guys as well, because you'll actually have to watch me cut all that wood out. Mind you, having said which, there's probably about the same amount when I really look at it. The tail's the interesting one because it's so thin. Getting a decent tail without breaking it, and the wingtips will prove to be challenging. I don't particularly have that as a problem, but you've got the thumbs on the wing there. Could well be interesting. The legs will be easier to do on this one than this one, just because of trying to get in between the legs and the tail to hollow that out. This one you can't see well, you can just see one of the dragon's hands, but I could always omit that anyway, without without affecting the image. Whereas this one we've got the full hands and arms. A little bit more detail of the head there because it's turned towards us than this one. Yeah, I think. Well, you seem to be being outvoted, Free. I do love this image though. It really is of something graceful in flight. Is that sort of image? Just it's the start. Bank of start of a turn, catching a thermal. It's quite a graceful image. It's a nice. You've got the nice sweep of the wings, which is a beautiful thing to actually, when you get those curves in art, they always look really good. I'm kind of thinking about maybe, and especially because you guys are possibly trying to torture me into doing what might be harder, but I'm kind of thinking maybe trying to carve that and then put that onto pyrography. Do that as a pyro image, and then the choice becomes: do I do that or the elephant, which 3D suggested I do as my next pyrography image. It is a tough call sometimes when you look at them, and it's something like this that you want to try and and to be honest, it's going to be a fairly blatant copy. I mean, the execution of it is going to be all mine. But the outline is going to be a copy. I suppose I could sit down and draw it, but I'd still be more or less reproducing the same image. So it will be it will essentially be a copy anyway. But I can't think of a better image of a dragon to do it with. Yeah, we shall. I'll have a little bit more of a think about that. So let's go on with this. Have I threaded that needle correctly? Yes, I have. Okay. And right. So I've got a lighter colour. Actually, I said I'd try and do a little bit of sculpting on these wheels, so I shall bring down the... I've used 2 notches rather than 3. That will mean it doesn't go through quite as far, and therefore the inside bit of the wheel will be indented somewhat to the outside rim, which kind of is what a wheel looks like. But I'll just do that on these 3 here. The ones at the back I'll make all the same depth. So it's kind of, yeah. Ow! Again, that's an ow, which was, don't be silly, Mark, don't stick your fingers in the way. Okay. Right, that's not bad. That is, you might not show up on camera, but they are, you know, this lighter outside edge does stand further up than the brown inside it, which will just give it a different effect. You can do this. I've done it with cats, for example, which is, by sculpting the edge and where their nose is, for example, you can get a semi three-dimensional sort of view of the cat, and it makes it look slightly a more an interesting picture. It's a bit hard to do on something like a locomotive, just because it kind of looks silly if you're not not careful, because there isn't that much change in depth on like a side of a locomotive or something like that. Kind of done it with a handrail around here, and these, but that's kind of about it. Anyway, onwards. Okay, have a good afternoon, good evening, Bubbles, the monkey. Nice to see you. Yep, I hope to see you back at some point. But go spend time with the little one. It's time you'll never have again, so spend it now. These wheels on the back look ginormous. No speculation on the contents of the link allowed. I'm thinking of putting rails in. And I'm thinking of sort of cheating putting rails in, because I'm not going to be able to do anything like the sorts of colours that are there. So I think we'll just put these in here in this, or at least the front one in this grey colour. Just a moment. It'll go quiet just for a second. Sorry about that, guys. Just a quick conversation with my wife. Mentioned earlier she doesn't particularly care to be on the streams, which is fair enough. I will just move. Oh, that's right, yeah. Just for the minute then, Free, for some reason my mouse landed over the ban button against your name by pure accident, so I figured I'd better move it before I accidentally click it again. Accidentally banned you yesterday, accidentally muted my microphone quite a few times this afternoon for exactly the same reason. Now moved my trackball to the other side of my desk. And there's no way I can accidentally push it now. I don't know, I think it's some sort of conspiracy on the part of the trackball to do something. 1, 2, 3. Let's put some rails down for this guy to sit on. Alright, I'm going to start where I know it is, and then we'll add the other bits in a little bit later. This is where I find out how good I am at following lines. Apparently not quite as good as I thought, since I haven't quite made contact with that wheel. Still nobody will notice afterwards. Now my intention is to try and fill this complete hoop with thread such that the other side is completely covered. So one of the things I want to do is to sculpt the edge if I can, which means that it's got a rounded end on it basically. So what I've got to try and do here is just adjust the depth such that I get a sculpted edge, and I've just managed. Can't quite of course get the needle right up to the edge, so now I'm going to come in from this end and come backwards, but it wants to be about there. Now this starting from the edge is slightly easier because the first where I start from is the first depth of the needle, and then once I pull out of there I can make it a click deeper for the next two, and I don't have to guess where I need to start doing the change of needle depth. Now for the rail itself it wouldn't have made much difference if I hadn't quite got it right, because it's only one thread. It'll be more important when I do the background. No, something's wrong. You can see there was a whole length of thread there that wasn't catching. Usually what happens is, yeah, there's just the thread has got caught somewhere on something. Ah dear. Ah dear. Conspiracy theories are fun. The funny thing, I think, Angelina Jaslin, thank you for following and joining the studio. That's most kind of you. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the studio. What was I saying? Oh yeah, conspiracy theories are fun, you know, because if somebody's got in a group of of conspiracy theorists, then the fun thing about them is that if you take one of the group and tell them the truth, and if that truth is what the conspiracy theory is about, then if that person then goes back to the group and tells them that that they've gone and they've been told the truth, and the truth is exactly what the conspiracy theorists thought it was, then none of them believe them, and they think that they've sold out and that there's actually something else going on, and they change their theory, which is a real fun thing to have happen. Kerbal 1 release coming soon. Okay. I can't quite get in there. Punchcraft is a thing that on certain streams you should avoid, depending on the mindset of the audience. Okay, well, that's a bit of a wavy line, but none of it's fantastically straight anyway. As some material goes, you know, it's wavy because this brown here is pushing the loops over. But as more material goes on this side, it will push them straight again. The line is slightly wavy, but there we go. And although it has been sculpted at this right and left hand side, you might just see little tiny loops. You won't really notice that until there's more material in. So there's one of the railheads in place. There is another one that goes behind it down here, at least partly. It's really difficult to see. I'm kind of wondering how to go about doing that. I know, yeah. I'm going to apply artistic license, which means I'm going to make it up. And what I'm going to do is I will put this grey, because it will show up because of the light which reflects off the railhead, which is nice and shiny. But what I'll then do is underneath the loco I'll put green, a row of green, as though there's grass on the other side, which there isn't in the reference image, but that will just highlight the railhead as being different to the rest. Not quite sure what to get in for the track bed though. We shall see. Thank you very much, Angelina Jaslyn, for that comment. Is it expensive to get into pyrography? Depends on the style of pyrography that you're interested in doing, and how you want to go about it. So let me just put that down. In fact, I'll answer this question, then I think that probably will be the end of the stream for now, because I'll have tea and then prepare for the carving stream later on, because I'll need to clear all the desk. Okay, there's pyrography, which is bits of chocolate. There's pyrography which is art based, like this sort of style, if you like, or similar. It's intended to represent something that's out there and have. I hesitate to call it photorealistic, but it actually, it's kind of it's not a cartoon style where you've got a black line around everything, etc. Although that often works quite well as well. There's then a style which is cartoon style, which is, as I say, is a black line generally around everything, and then it's coloured in. There's then styles which are purely black and white, so it's about as dark as you can get, and they're like dots or marks, very much like scraper board would be, but the other way around, white on black. And then there's a style which is just like stamps, so triangles, moon shapes, spade shape, that sort of thing, just stamped on. Now the stamp type work is generally done with a tool that resembles a soldering iron, so it's a fairly chunky handle with a silver bowl, and then the tip screws into the end of it. Those sorts of things are generally what you'll find in craft shops and hobby shops, and they're probably about I don't know, I want to say in the range of £20 to £30, which is probably about $25 to $40 US, that sort of range, and depending on how many tips they come with, or whether you can get extra tips and things. Now those sorts of machines have a single temperature, and you're holding them quite a long way away from the tip. I don't have a soldering iron out, but if you sort of imagine this sort of thing here, you're holding it back here, and it's quite hard to hold it pencil style, shall we say, because it's quite a thick handle on them. I don't really have anything which is, you're getting a handle at sort of this sort of size at its widest. So if you can imagine trying to hold something fairly thick like that and do this sort of work would be quite difficult. People do it. Okay, so from the point of view of, if you want to try simple pyrography, stamps, doing lines, or dots, for example, because they're very good for doing dots, and you can get bigger dots and smaller dots just by how you do it, but you tend to get just black and white because you're holding it in place for a long time. Then that sort of tool works quite well. It's a really good tool for doing that because they hold a lot of heat, because they're relatively high power. They heat up fairly quickly as well. They keep the heat, and if they lose it because you're touching down on the wood, they heat back up quite quickly. When you start to move towards more shaded work as opposed to just pure black and white, those tools will still work. You just have to use them in a different way. Generally speaking, you're doing it by moving the tool a lot faster across something so that heat doesn't stay in one place very long. And there are some phenomenal artists that do use that sort of tool and produce some really fantastic fully shaded work that beats what I've done here without any shade of a doubt. And I know I'm using shade twice. But generally speaking, that the people that do shaded work, and I know this looks more black and white, but here's something more shaded, for example. The people who do more shaded work tend to find it easier, shall we say, to use tools which allow them to change the temperature. And that's where you get into pyrographic machines that are more like this one. I'm sorry it's sideways, but that's just the way the camera is. There you go. Now, these are relatively expensive machines. There are other manufacturers, of course. Peter, there's Firewriter, and two or three others that I can't actually remember the name of at the moment. They generally speaking all have some form of interchangeable tool. But these are upwards of £150, $180 or more, depending on various factors. For example, this one is more expensive because it's got two outputs. The only difference is it's a switch with two sockets on the end, and you pay a fair bit for that. But yeah, you live and learn. So these are more flexible because it has a control knob on there. I can turn the heat down and turn the heat up. And also, generally speaking, with these sorts of machines, you get the option to use all sorts of different tips. I've just got, I've got 4 here, just to one side. Okay. Most of the machines have tools like this where you've got screws on the front. You can unscrew them to change the tip, and a lot of them are just wires, which you can bend to any sorts of shapes. Different tools like this one, you can get tips, which actually work in the other machines as well, like this that are flat, and they do different jobs. This particular tool is got a fixed tip, as is this one here. They're fixed. The tips don't come out. So these tools are more expensive. So a tool like that is probably about £25. That's probably in the range of $30. And tips, start at about £5 UK, about $7 or $8. You add probably about £10, $15 for a fixed version of the same tool. So instead of being sort of 25, that's probably about £30, about $38, $40, that sort of thing. But because they're variable, because you've got the different shaped tips that you can choose, you can essentially plug or unplug them. All the machines have some form of plug capability. Then you can change the tip out fairly easily, so that if I'm doing little tiny areas, I can use a small tip like this. If I'm doing some bigger areas, I can switch to a bigger tip. Oh, there you go. Mad Bats obviously has got experience. I was just looked it up. Thank you very much. To my mind, they're expensive, but they're worth it. But that's my opinion. There is a guy you might see around called Cannonbear. He uses a tool which is the soldering iron style. He still does shaded work, although he prefers a cartoon style. But he uses a soldering iron, the style of tool to do that with. So, he's still a good artist. So, a pyrographic artist. So it's not the tool that makes you do good art or bad art. It really is about the skill that you learn to develop using the tool that you've got. It's just these make it easier. Or in my opinion, they make it easier. I will say it's always my opinion is this. I have a soldering iron, and I have tried using it to do pyrography. I couldn't get on with it, but that's me. Other people, of course, can. Yeah, so it's I guess it really comes down to a case of deciding whether what you like. I also potentially have a semi-unique point of view in that I will sort of invest in the tools. Because there's a difficulty where if you try and do something and you mess it up for the first time, you've never done it before, you mess it up, you've got two questions in your mind. One is, am I messing it up, or is the tool that I'm using making it easy for me to mess up? Okay. Is there a problem with the tool that's stopping me being able to use it properly, or use it, and has it got a fault, for example? And that's kind of a difficult thing to do. And with really, really cheap stuff, you don't have the confidence that the tool is doing what it's doing in order for you as a beginner to distinguish that. So I think there's a certain case for investing in a reasonable quality. That doesn't mean going right to the top end. It just means getting something that you have a reasonable confidence is will do what you're asking it to do. And there's a couple of examples of that. One of which is associated with the carving I'm going to do tonight. If I just dig under here. I'm back here. Okay. Let me just move this out of the way, otherwise it'll get dirty. What I've got here is two sets of carving tools. I've got this set, and I've got a set in here. Now, this set cost close to 190 UK pounds, which is probably about $250, I guess. I don't know the actual conversion rates, but that sort of idea. the set of tools in here with large handles, I know are available for about 10 UK pounds. It's probably about $15. Okay. Now, if you try carving with these, you will not have a very good experience, to say the least. But if you've never done carving before, you don't know. These tools are actually blunt, relatively speaking. Well, you could cut yourself on this one because some of these I've spent a long time trying to sharpen, but they are blunt. I'm doing that. I wouldn't do that with one of the ones from behind it. You wouldn't catch me doing that with this because I'm very likely to cut myself. It is sharp. I have accidentally just caught the edges of some of these, and I've drawn blood. These are really sharp tools, and I keep them sharp. If you watch the stream, you'll probably see me sharpen these, or do something which is sharpening them about every 5 minutes, and that is something that you do as a carver. Is you keep sharpening the tools. These, when they were bought, were blunt. There is absolutely no way. I've spent on about at least 3 of these. I've spent several hours trying to sharpen them to the point where they are usable. So if as a beginner I got that and I tried carving it, I would have not had a really good experience at all. The wood would have ripped. It would have been really hard work. I couldn't have got any detail. I possibly would have hurt myself, and I wouldn't know why. Because I've now got experience, if you like. The experience tells me it's because they're blunt. You need sharp tools. So, you know, as I say, I've spent quite some time trying to sharpen these, and they're still not sharp. Still not usable. This one's the nearest, but it's still blunt. I sort of could get something out of this, but you know, as I say, it's still blunt, and that's after several hours of work trying to sharpen them. So you know, the investment, if you like, in these tools underneath meant that I could carve, and meant that if I messed up, I knew it was me that was messing up, and not the tools. With this, I wouldn't have known. You know, if this had been my only experience of carving, I'd have given up, and I wouldn't be doing some of the work that I am doing. And that's a piece that we did on stream, which we then painted, relief carved out of some really hard wood to do it on, which is why it's not a fantastically good relief carving, but at least it was carved by hand on stream, and we've got some better wood tonight, so hopefully it will go a lot better. But you know, I wouldn't ever have got to doing anything like that using those tools. I'd have given up. So you know, that's again, it's not a case for going out and buying, you know, £500 worth of tools or a £300 you know, pyrography machine. It's really a case of understand what you're getting into, and probably don't go for the cheapest that you can get. You know, to start with, if you're not confident, you're not sure whether it's something that you like, try the soldering iron tool. Go for something in sort of the mid-range of those, which gives you lots of tips, for example, to experiment with. Make sure you've got something like a heat-proof board that you can put the iron down on if it doesn't come with its own stand, because otherwise you will burn something on the desk or something like that. So but yeah, that's kind of a bit into my philosophy there. You know, sometimes it is worth investing in the tools that you want to try, at least to a reasonable level, just to be sure that if you decide to give up, then you've given up because, you know, it's something that you don't find enjoyable, rather than something that you're being forced to not find enjoyable. And decent tools have a decent resale value as well. I've never tried to sell any, but I have sort of seen on eBay things like this, which are going for about 60 or 70% of their cost, at the very least, in a second hand. So they tend to hold the value as well. But there you go. Right, as I said, it's now 6 o'clock in the UK. It's time for me to get myself some tea and prepare for this evening's stream, when I shall tidy up this desk and before I make a mess of it with carving. There will be wood chips all over the place by the time we've finished, I hope, unless I spend more time talking and not actually doing again, but we shall see how it goes. So thank you all for watching this somewhat ad hoc stream, helping me decide which image we might be carving this evening. And if you want to see some more of this Punchcraft, the next time will probably be next weekend. I suspect I probably won't do any before then, but during the week I'll be carving. If we finish carving, then we move on to pyrography, and we'll see how we go from there. We won't finish pyrography this week, even if we started it. So, but we shall see how things go. I suspect the carving actually will take at least a week, and maybe into sometime next week. So if you would like to keep up with me, if you want to push the follow button, as Angelina Jaslyn did there earlier, and a few other people, then of course Twitch should helpfully and hopefully tell you when I go live. If it doesn't, or you don't trust it, you can also follow me on Twitter at Zaragonart, or as it says below the stream window, and I'm not going to point, especially with Losty in the house, as I'm never very good at pointing downwards. As you just saw, I pointed upwards, which is totally the wrong direction. But I don't tweet a lot, so you don't have to worry about being inundated with tweets. In the meantime, I will probably start in about 2 hours from now, around about 8 PM UK time. As I say, 2 hours from wherever you are in the world, I should be live again, hopefully with some carving. Thank you all, and see you later.